Because I've proven that I can be the lawyer for the people and someone who's going to consistently put people before powerful institutions, take on the biggest fights, and deliver for my constituents. We've got a lot more work to do on the opioid front, on protecting people's rights, on making sure consumers, especially our seniors, are looked after. And I would be honored to be able to continue to do that work for the people of Pennsylvania.
Extensive experience as a lawyer in the Commonwealth. I practiced law in 54 of the 67 counties. And I know that our current Attorney General, Mr. Shapiro, really wants to run for governor in 2022, and he would have to begin to run almost immediately upon his reelection if he were to be reelected. And so I really want to provide the voters with an opportunity to have a full-time Attorney General. In addition, Mr. Shapiro has changed the office of Attorney General quite dramatically. He's turned it from an office that concentrates on law enforcement as well as defending the Commonwealth to what he calls the nation's largest public interest law firm. And I don't really think that's what the Attorney General of a state ought to be doing.
It's a significant issue, and it's my top priority. And the way you eliminate it is by making sure that you've got a comprehensive approach. Let me break it down for you real quick. Historically, law enforcement has just focused on arresting dealers who are infecting our communities with these poisons. And by the way, we do our fair share of that. In fact, 2019, we recorded the highest number of arrests of people peddling these poisons in our communities in years. So we don't take a backseat to anyone on that. But we have to be very honest about the fact that drug addiction is a disease, not a crime, and we need to focus on treatment and prevention. And we also need to focus on getting at the root cause of this crisis. And to me, the root cause goes deeper than just the street corners in Harrisburg or Lancaster. It goes all the way to the boardrooms of pharmaceutical companies, the very people that lied to the American people about the addictive nature of an OxyContin, for example. They need to be held accountable. And I'm one of a handful of attorneys general leading the national investigation and settlement discussions with those opioid manufacturers and distributors. We're going to complete that process soon, and we're going to deliver billions, that's with a B, Matt, billions of dollars back to the states to support treatment and related services in our communities. This remains a huge issue, whether the media is focused on it or not. Understandably so. COVID is an incredibly massive challenge. I understand why that gets so much oxygen. But for us in the Attorney General's office, we continue to be full steam ahead on battling the heroin, fentanyl, and opioid crisis here in South Central Pennsylvania and all across the Commonwealth.
So in my talks with the district attorneys in Pennsylvania, as well as the U.S. attorneys, I've spoken to all three of the U.S. attorneys that obviously coordinate the federal enforcement. We're seeing somewhat of a change in the drug trafficking in this way. The federal government and the state and local governments have really tried to attack the opioid epidemic through legislation, through lawsuits, through federal action against the opioid manufacturers, as well as the pill mill doctors and the pharmacists who would prescribe oversubscribe and prescribe and distribute drugs. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is, the substantive part of fentanyl comes from China, then goes to the cartels in Mexico. The cartels in Mexico then ship it throughout the United States. So unfortunately, this is not a problem that is going to go away, even if we tackle and defeat the opioid crisis. It's going to come through in other measures. So there has to be a continual fight against drugs because the money is so overwhelming. So the fight against the southern border continues, the fight against the traffickers. We see it coming through Detroit, Cleveland, Philadelphia, New York. And it's just going to be a continual fight.
I don't know that there's anything I want to make more of a priority and anything I didn't focus on, but there's certainly unfinished business. I'll give you a few examples. And obviously, Matt, I know you understand this. I'm limited in what I can say about the work we're doing because of secrecy issues. But in general, I've been very open about the fact that we need to work through this process on the opioid settlement, deliver those billions back to the states. I've been open on the fact that, there will be more public corruption arrests, sadly. That's been a priority of mine. I've been open about the fact that there would be more charges as a result of our broader investigation into the fracking industry in Pennsylvania and the way in which our water and air has been poisoned by the criminal acts of these companies. So I've been pretty open on a number of fronts that, we'll have more to say about. Obviously, combating child sexual abuse has been a huge priority, from teachers and doctors in our community to, of course, predator priests. And there will be more to come on that front as well.
One of the first things I'm going to do on parallel tracks, I'll talk about both of them, is I'm going to convene a meeting with all the district attorneys. I've spoken with many of them. They've never been contacted by the Attorney General. I'm going to bring them to Harrisburg. We're going to have a 2-day meeting, and I'm going to say, what are the things that the Attorney General's office is doing correctly, and what are the things that the Attorney General's could improve on? I've heard a lot of complaints across the Commonwealth about a lack of coordination, about a lack of taking cases that are referred to them. In addition, crime doesn't stay in one county. It goes over multiple counties, especially in the drug trade. And I want to bring everybody together so that the local, state, and national can work together. And there isn't this, feeling where this is my prosecution, I won the prosecution, I have a number of tallies of prosecution, because that doesn't matter. Ego should not matter on who prosecutes a case. All the resources of all the government entities should come together to try to put these people who would spread poison in our communities behind bars.
Look, this has been a priority of mine long before I became the Attorney General, but certainly in this post, while I'm not a lawmaker, I'm a law enforcer, as you correctly pointed out. I certainly have a bully pulpit, and I'm using it to advance the cause of justice. I think it's important to recognize that racism is real and Black lives matter. And just saying that isn't enough. We have to accept and acknowledge the fact that in our educational system, in our commercial sector, and indeed in our criminal justice system, there are inequities, and a lot of them can be tracked back to slavery. And I think when we acknowledge that and we speak truthfully about that, then policy changes can come. Now, again, making changes on the education side and what have you, while important, it really is not within the scope of my authority, but certainly our criminal justice system is. And so I started by getting my own house in order, by changing changing the personnel leading the agents in my office to make sure that they were more diverse and more reflective of the people of Pennsylvania. Changing our training regimen so that we're not just training on the physical attributes and aspects of doing this job, but also the mental ones. Addressing implicit bias, understanding what that really means when you roll up on a situation with someone who looks different than you. Being really honest about those things internally within our agency. And then looking outward at others in law enforcement and seeing where we could create change. I'll give you one concrete example. I pulled together, really for the first time, a coalition of law enforcement leaders, reform advocates, legislative Black caucus, and helped change the laws here in Pennsylvania to create a statewide database of police officer misconduct. So if an officer is going from jurisdiction A to jurisdiction B, his or her track record is known to that new jurisdiction. That's good for law enforcement, who has to work alongside him or her. And it's also good for the community so that we can begin to restore some faith and confidence between the police and the community that they're protecting.
When I see the rioting in the streets, obviously it burdens my heart that we as Americans are still at this place so many years after Dr. King was killed in the streets, and so many years after legislation has attempted to rectify the evil in men's hearts. I think that abolishing the police or the abolished police movement is not the right way to go. I think that in more intensive training, I have talked to police chiefs, I've talked to state patrolmen and women, and I think that what has to happen is we need to standardize procedures. You look at the best police forces in the Commonwealth, and they have rules, laws, procedures, training to eliminate some of the things that we have seen that cause people to die that cause misidentification or, these horrible mistakes. Instead of creating situations where we're fighting the police, I think we need to fund more training. We need to standardize procedures for some of the smallest municipalities in Pennsylvania. I think we need to come to a regional police force where we take out of, from a very small municipality, a single police officer or part-time police officers that are struggling to be educated, struggling to have standard procedures. And we put in a regional police force where we combine resources, combine standardization, better training, better checking of police officers' backgrounds, and perhaps that would be more of a solution to the problem.
Of course, if they broke the law. Look, I don't take this president to court when I disagree with him. I take this president to court when he breaks the law, and my track record of success in court bears that out. Right now, I'm battling, for example, on the front of making sure that voters' rights are protected in Pennsylvania. The president has literally sued the Commonwealth to make it harder for people to vote. We fought back and we're winning. We won just on Saturday. There was a ruling that came from a federal judge reaffirming our laws and supporting our view of the world, not the president's. Look, when we go to court, this isn't about ideology or politics. This is about protecting the rights and interests of the people of Pennsylvania. Let me give you a very concrete example. Article 1, Section 27 of our state constitution says that you and every resident in Pennsylvania has a right to clean air and pure water. It says it right there in our state constitution. And so if it's the federal government or a fracking company or some individual who's violating that constitutional right, I would think you'd want the people's lawyer to stand up and protect those interests and sue on their behalf. And I have sued the federal government multiple times based on that constitutional provision and won every single time. And so, for me, if a Biden administration, in your hypothetical as you laid out, undermine the rights and interests of the people of Pennsylvania, I wouldn't hesitate for a second to take him to court. I would hope, of course, that he wouldn't do that. But if he did, it's the same rules that apply right now.
Well, let me say this. I have stood up against my party many times. I have a long record of standing up, probably to my detriment, political detriment, and saying what I think. I have criticized both presidents, whether they be Republican or Democrat. I'm absolutely not afraid to stand up. I've had personal consequences for standing up to powerful leaders. When I was county council person, I stood up to the county executive and had my job threatened. I've stood up to Acorn and had threats against my very existence. So, if you're going to take on tough issues, you have to be strong enough to stand up to tough interests. So if there's illegality and those people happen to have Republican after their name, that would cause me no pause whatsoever.